Alright, so we're changing the diff fluid in the Genesis sedan. So I figured I'd do this in a how-to. I did this a long time ago and I kind of hid it in a video. Nobody's ever going to find it if they need it. So I'm going to make a dedicated video, how to change your differential fluid in your first generation sedan. And this is pretty much a universal thing on any car, but I'll just do it for, specifically the locations of the fill bolt and the drain bolt on the Genesis platform, as well as what you kind of need in terms of oil and specs of the oil and stuff like that. I've mentioned numerous times on this channel, the one maintenance item that you should not take to the dealer because they overcharge is a differential fluid change. It's a very simple job to do, very cheap. If you take it to the dealer, you're going to end up paying like 3 times more. I did this twice already in my ownership, and it's cost me $40, just shy of $40 each time. So do this yourself. It's very simple. The only caveat with changing your own differential fluid is the smell. It's rancid. It's got a very distinctive smell and it's not good. So with that out of the way, this is what you need to change your differential fluid. So obviously you're going to need differential fluid to do this job, and the manual specifically states that you need an API GL-5 oil and it's a 75W-90. I wouldn't deviate from that. I would put exactly what the manual calls for, and it also recommends a Shell Spirax oil or equivalent. I couldn't find Shell Spirax oil, so I used Mobil One. I used it the last time as well. It's the same thing. It meets all the specs as the Shell Spirax. So I'll leave a link to everything that you need down in the description, including this oil. And you're going to need 1.5 quarts of that. Obviously, you can't get diff fluid in half a quart, but we won't waste the other half a quart. I'll show you what I kind of do with that a little later in the video. You're also going to need a multi-purpose transfer pump. I wouldn't recommend getting the ones that you screw onto the diff bottles and you pump that way. They just never work properly. They never hold a good vacuum. So these are relatively inexpensive. They make the job so much easier, so much faster. So I'll leave a link down in the description. Also going to need some brake clean and some towels and a 24mm socket. But in my case, considering I don't have one, a 15/16 is the equivalent. And both the fill plug and the drain plug are the same size. So first you want to jack up your car and make sure that it is level. You don't want the front end to be higher than the back end and vice versa. You want it to be level, and that is to adequately fill the differential with the necessary amount of fluid. So first thing you want to do is remove the fill plug, because if you go to drain all your fluid from the drain plug and you can't get the fill plug off, you're in deep shit. So what I like to do is remove the fill plug first, but before that I like to spray some brake cleaner and wipe away all the grime and dust and dirt, just so none of that stuff makes its way into the differential. So once you verify the fill plug is able to come out, I like to do the same thing with the drain bolt, clean around with some brake clean, wipe it off, just to make sure nothing gets inside of that differential. So then you can start draining the diff. So start by removing the drain plug. To make the flow even faster, you can remove the fill plug. And this is about the time you want to air out the garage. Alright, so here's the controversial part. The last time I did this, I called a dealership and asked for the copper washers that come on both the fill plug and the drain plug. They insisted that it didn't have any. So when I went the last time to unbolt both of them, they sure enough both had a copper washer, and I was shit out of luck back then because you can't really drive to go get a copper washer with no fluid in your diff. So this time again I looked through the service manual, There's no information about a copper washer. I called a different dealership a few days before I started this job. They didn't know what I was talking about, insisted again that there was no such thing that I was asking for. Fast forward to a couple days later, lo and behold, I completely forgot. I removed both plugs, completely forgetting that they had copper washers. And in my opinion, you shouldn't reuse copper washers, but in this instance, I was shit out of luck. I couldn't go anywhere to get new ones. So if you guys know the part number or the size of the copper washers, please leave it down in the description so other people can refer to it and replace theirs. I do not like to reuse copper washers, but in these two cases, I'm a dumbass and I had to. The first time I did it, it didn't leak at all. It just kind of, torqued it down. Also, that's another thing. There's no torque specs in the service manual. There is nothing about refilling the differential fluid in the service manual, like, at all. So I don't know what that means. Maybe it's just too easy. They didn't deem it necessary to put in there, but no information about how to service the diff or part numbers regarding to the copper washers. Even the drain plug and the fill plug weren't in there, nor are there any torque specs for fill and drain plug, only the cover bolts on the outside of the pumpkin. So what I did here again was just clean off the bolts and the copper washers as best as I could and reuse them. Now you'll notice on the drain plug there's an indentation, and it's actually a magnetized bolt. So any shards or metal shavings circulating in the diff don't get caught in all the gears, so the drain plug actually catches all of that. And it is normal to get shavings and sludge on that bolt. That's what it's there for. Anything that's like super excessive or like large substantial chunks, then you have a problem. This here is normal. You'll get a little sludge and a little shavings. So you just clean that off, wipe it off, some brake clean, and you're good to go. So next you're ready to set up your pump. Now this particular pump and most pumps come with two really long siphon tubes. So what I do, I'll take one, cut it in half because they're really long, and this way you can save a tube for another project. So I'll just fold it in half, cut it with some scissors, and use one tube for both inlet and outlet. So this pump's pretty cool. You can insert the siphon tube and it'll self-lock itself, and to remove it you just kind of depress the white piece and pull the tube out. So take your pump and your two bottles over to the differential. Peel the top and insert the inlet side of the pump into one of the bottles. And the other end, which is the outlet, obviously into the differential fill plug. So for the first initial pump, considering you do have a half a quart to play with, what I like to do is remove the drain plug. When you pump in the oil, it'll kind of flush out all of the metal shavings and the old fluid out. So really you're not actually wasting a half a quart of differential fluid, you're using it to flush out the diff from anything previous. Just make sure you don't pump too much in there because then you won't have enough to adequately fill the differential. So then after flushing it with that half a quart, reinstall the drain plug and torque it to spec, which I don't have because it's nowhere online nor in the service manual. So just do it snug, just enough to crush the copper washer. Then continue pumping the 1.5 quarts into your diff. Now diffs are easy to gauge how much to put in there because you just keep pumping until it starts coming out, dribbling out of the fill plug. And that's why it is imperative to have your car level when you jack it up. So once oil starts dribbling out of the fill plug, just wait for it to kind of stop, wipe it off, and reinstall your fill plug. And once again, reinstall your fill plug, making sure to torque it down enough to crush that copper washer. And that's pretty much it. It's not a difficult job to do. You save a ton of money. You know you're doing it the right way. You're putting the right oil in. Yeah, so if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them down below. And again, if you have the torque specs to the fill and drain plug on the differential or the size of the copper washers, please put them down below so that we can all refer to that and not make mistakes like me. And yeah, that's all I got, and I'll see you guys in the next one. But I'll show you kind of what I do with the other half. But I'll show you what I do with the other half. But I'll show you what I do with the remaining half. With that out of the way, this is what you're also going to need: a transfer pump. These are very cheap. I wouldn't advise getting the ones that you screw onto the bottles. You're also going to need a multi-purpose transfer pump. I wouldn't recommend getting You're also going to need a multi-purpose transfer pump. I wouldn't recommend getting You're also going to need a multi-purpose transfer pump.